The Mediterranean Sea, a shimmering crossroads of ancient civilizations. For centuries, Rome's dominance seemed inevitable, but before the eagles flew supreme, another power held sway: Carthage. Founded by Phoenician explorers around 8014 BC. This city-state would become a formidable maritime empire, challenging Roman ambitions and shaping the course of Western history. This is the story of Carthage, its rise from humble beginnings to a commercial powerhouse, its brutal conflicts with Rome, and ultimately its tragic demise. Carthage's origins are shrouded in myth. Legend tells of Queen Dido fleeing Tyre, a Phoenician city, state ravaged by conflict, and establishing a new home on the North African coast. While these stories likely blend fact with legend, they highlight Carthage's connection to its ancestral homeland. The Phoenicians were master sailors and traders, bringing their knowledge and skills to their new colony. This early expertise in navigation and commerce would prove crucial for Carthage's future success. Carthage's geographical location was key to its prosperity. Situated strategically on the coast of modern-day Tunisia, it controlled vital trade routes connecting Europe, Africa, and beyond. From here, Carthaginian merchants ferried goods, silver, tin, purple dye, textiles across the Mediterranean, establishing a vast network of trading posts and colonies. This commercial empire brought immense wealth to Carthage, fueling its growth and military expansion. Unlike Rome, which emphasized citizen, soldiers, and land-based power, Carthage built its strength on naval dominance. Its fleet of biremes, swift and maneuverable warships, ruled the waves. Carthaginian admirals, like Hanno and Hannibal Barca, not that Hannibal yet, were renowned for their skill and strategic acumen. This naval supremacy allowed Carthage to protect its trade routes, project power across the Mediterranean, and establish a far-reaching sphere of influence. Carthage's society was complex and hierarchical. At the top were wealthy merchant families who controlled much of the city's economic and political power. Beneath them were skilled artisans, traders, and a large population of enslaved people, often prisoners of war or those captured through piracy. The Maginid family, in particular, rose to prominence, shaping Carthaginian foreign policy and military strategy for generations. The First Punic War, 264–241 BC, marked a turning point in the relationship between Carthage and Rome. Initially a conflict over control of Sicily, it escalated into a protracted struggle for dominance of the Mediterranean. Both sides built massive fleets and engaged in brutal naval battles. The war exposed Carthaginian weaknesses, particularly their reliance on mercenaries and their difficulty mobilizing troops from across their vast empire. Despite early successes in the First Punic War, Carthage ultimately lost to Rome. The cost was staggering: significant territorial losses, crippling financial burdens, and a severe blow to Carthaginian prestige. The peace treaty forced Carthage to pay a substantial indemnity and surrender its control over Sicily. This defeat demonstrated that Carthaginian naval power alone could not guarantee survival against the rising Roman Republic. The loss of Sicily fueled resentment within Carthage and led to the rise of Hannibal Barca, perhaps history's most famous general. Driven by revenge and ambition, Hannibal launched a daring invasion of Italy in 218 BC, crossing the Alps with an army including war elephants. This audacious campaign shook Rome to its core, bringing the Republic to the brink of collapse. Hannibal's victories at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae were stunning. He inflicted devastating losses on Roman armies, demonstrating Carthaginian military brilliance. However, Hannibal lacked the resources to conquer Rome itself. His campaign became a war of attrition, slowly draining Carthage's strength while allowing Rome time to recover and regroup. Despite years of campaigning in Italy, Hannibal was eventually recalled to Africa to face Scipio Africanus. The Second Punic War culminated in the Battle of Zamos 202 BCS, where Scipio decisively defeated Hannibal's Carthaginian army. This marked the beginning of the end for Carthage, a slow decline into Roman vassalage that would ultimately lead to its complete destruction just decades later. The Punic Wars weren't solely about land. They were a clash of ideologies, Athenian democracy versus Carthaginian mercantile power. Carthage's commercial dominance across the Mediterranean fueled Roman anxieties, perceived as a direct threat to their expanding influence and control over vital trade routes. Rome saw Carthage not merely as a rival, but as an existential obstacle to its ambitions for regional hegemony. The First Punic War, erupting in 264 BC, became a protracted struggle for mastery of Sicily, the pivotal island dividing both empires. Early naval engagements favored Carthage, whose experienced sailors and superior ship designs initially outmatched Rome's fledgling fleet. However, recognizing their weakness, the Romans embarked on an ambitious shipbuilding program, the corvus. This innovative boarding device transformed Roman tactics, allowing legionaries to fight hand aboard Carthaginian vessels, effectively turning naval battles into land skirmishes. The corvus fundamentally altered the balance of power at sea. The First Punic War raged for over 2 decades, marked by brutal sieges and costly campaigns. The Battle of Agate's Islands in 241 BC proved decisive. A Roman victory shattered the Carthaginian fleet, forcing them to sue for peace. Carthage was compelled to cede Sicily and pay a crippling indemnity. This defeat severely weakened the Carthaginian Empire, but it didn't extinguish its ambition, particularly not under the leadership of Hamilcar. Barca. Barca, a brilliant but ruthless general, recognized that Carthage needed to rebuild its power base. He turned his attention westward, initiating a campaign to conquer Spain. His vision was audacious: establish Carthaginian dominion over the Iberian Peninsula, securing vital mineral resources and manpower to challenge Rome's dominance once more. This expansion would lay the groundwork for Hannibal's future exploits. Barca's son, Hannibal, witnessed his father's campaigns firsthand, absorbing invaluable military lessons. He developed a strategic genius renowned for its boldness and innovation. While Barca died in Spain, his vision passed to Hannibal, who would transform the Second Punic War into one of history's most legendary conflicts, employing tactics that defied conventional wisdom and terrified Rome. Hannibal's audacious plan involved marching an army, including war elephants, across the Alps, a feat previously considered impossible. The crossing was fraught with peril: blizzards, treacherous terrain, and hostile alpine tribes decimated his forces. Yet he persevered, emerging into Italy to deliver a stunning blow against Rome's southern armies at Trebia. The victories at Trebia and Lake Trasimene shook Rome to its core. Hannibal's army inflicted devastating losses on the legions, demonstrating the limitations of Roman military doctrine. His relentless pressure forced Rome into a defensive posture, draining their resources and undermining public morale. The Second Punic War now threatened to become an existential crisis for the Republic. Despite his victories, Hannibal could not decisively defeat Rome. His army lacked siege equipment to effectively assault the city itself, and reinforcements from Carthage proved insufficient. Meanwhile, Roman General Scipio Africanus emerged as a formidable opponent, employing Carthaginian tactics against them in Spain and North Africa. Diverting attention away from Italy, the Battle of Zama in 202 BC marked the end of Hannibal's Italian campaign. Scipio's strategic brilliance and numerical superiority overwhelmed Hannibal's forces, ending Carthaginian hopes of conquering Rome. The terms were harsh. Carthage was stripped of its overseas territories, its navy reduced to a handful of ships, and forced to pay another crippling indemnity, essentially becoming a Roman protectorate. The Third Punic War, a century later, was less about conquest and more about eliminating what Rome perceived as a perpetual threat. Under the pretext of piracy, Rome launched an unprovoked attack on Carthage in 146 BC. The city was systematically destroyed, its inhabitants enslaved or killed. This act of unparalleled brutality extinguished the flame of Carthaginian civilization, erasing it from the map of the Mediterranean world. By the 4th century BC, Carthage's commercial empire stretched across the western Mediterranean. Their mastery of shipbuilding and navigation allowed them to dominate trade routes, extracting resources from Sicily, Sardinia, Spain, and North Africa. This wealth fueled an ever-expanding military presence, but also created resentment amongst neighboring city-states. The burgeoning power of Syracuse under Dionysius I became a significant obstacle. Carthage's commercial dominance was no longer unchallenged, setting the stage for inevitable conflict. The First Punic War erupted in 264 BC, primarily over control of Sicily. Syracuse, allied with Rome, provided a crucial foothold for the Roman legions. Carthaginian naval superiority initially allowed them to raid Italian coastlines and threaten Roman supply lines. However, the Romans demonstrated remarkable adaptability, rapidly constructing their own fleet and developing innovative tactics, like the corvus, a boarding bridge that transformed naval battles into close quarters combat. The early years of the First Punic War were marked by shifting fortunes. While Carthage initially held advantages at sea, Roman persistence and resourcefulness gradually eroded their dominance. Battles like Mylae demonstrated the effectiveness of the corvus, inflicting heavy losses on Carthaginian crews. The war dragged on for decades, draining both sides' treasuries and manpower, a costly stalemate that exposed vulnerabilities in both empires' strategies. The mercenary revolt, 241–237 BC, following Carthage's defeat at the Battle of Agates Islands, proved a brutal internal crisis. Thousands of mercenaries, Libyans, Iberians, and others who had served in the Punic army mutinied, demanding unpaid wages and land. This uprising ravaged North Africa, forcing Carthage to commit significant resources to quell the rebellion, further weakening their position. The Second Punic Wars, 218–201 BC, was defined by Hannibal Barca's audacious invasion of Italy. Crossing the Alps with an army, including war elephants, he inflicted devastating defeats upon Roman legions at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae. These victories instilled fear throughout Rome and brought the city perilously close to collapse. Hannibal's strategic brilliance was almost unmatched in military history. Despite Hannibal's victories, Rome demonstrated remarkable resilience. They adopted a Fabian strategy, avoiding direct confrontation to wear down his forces over time. Simultaneously, Roman legions under Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus began campaigns in Spain and Africa, diverting Carthaginian resources away from Italy. The war had become a protracted struggle of attrition. Scipio's invasion of Africa proved decisive. Hannibal was recalled from Italy to defend Carthage, leading to the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. Scipio's tactical innovations and Roman discipline ultimately prevailed, ending Hannibal's long campaign in Italy and marking a turning point in the Second Punic War. It demonstrated that Carthaginian military might could be overcome. The Treaty of Rome, 201 BC, imposed harsh terms on Carthage. They were forced to cede territory, dismantle their fleet, pay a crippling indemnity to Rome, and agree to never wage war without Roman permission. This treaty effectively stripped Carthage of its military power and commercial independence, subjecting it to Roman dominance for decades. Despite their weakened state, Carthage recovered economically. They rebuilt their trade networks and even challenged Roman authority on occasion, leading to a Third Punic War in 149 BC. This final conflict was fueled by Roman paranoia and the desire for complete control over the Mediterranean. The relentless pressure of Rome ensured that any resurgence of Carthaginian power would be short-lived. The siege and destruction of Carthage in 146 BC marked a tragic end to a once great civilization. The city was razed, its inhabitants enslaved or killed, and the land sown with salt, though this detail is likely apocryphal. The elimination of Carthage removed a major rival from Rome's path, solidifying Roman dominance over the Mediterranean world for centuries to come, a profound loss to the ancient world. The First Punic War's impact on Carthaginian agriculture was devastating. Sicily, once a vital source of grain and resources, became a drain on their treasury and manpower. Farmers were conscripted into the military or displaced by conflict. This created widespread hardship within Carthage's territories in North Africa, particularly amongst those who relied on Sicilian trade routes for sustenance. While Carthaginian merchants attempted to compensate with increased trade elsewhere, it proved insufficient to alleviate the growing economic strain and internal dissent that simmered beneath the surface. Hamilcar Barca emerges as a key figure following Carthage's defeat. Recognizing the need to secure resources beyond North Africa, he embarked on an ambitious campaign in Iberia, modern-day Spain, and Portugal. His strategies were brutal but effective, establishing Carthaginian control through military conquest and strategic alliances with local tribes. This expansion wasn't solely about resource acquisition, it was a deliberate attempt to create a new base of power, independent of Roman influence and capable of rebuilding Carthage's strength. Hasdrubal the Fair, Hamilcar's successor, continued his work in Iberia, focusing on consolidating Carthaginian power and improving infrastructure. He founded New Carthage, Cartagena and Elf, a strategically vital port city that became a major hub for trade and military operations. Crucially, Hasdrubal also implemented a policy of intermarriage between Carthaginian soldiers and Iberian women, forging stronger bonds and integrating the local population into Carthaginian society. This careful groundwork laid the foundation for future expansion. Hannibal Barca, Hamilcar's son, inherited his father's ambition and military genius. Though young, he fiercely resented Rome's dominance and vowed to avenge Carthage's earlier humiliation. His upbringing steeped in anti-Roman sentiment by his father instilled a profound hatred that would fuel his daring campaign decades later. This early indoctrination shaped his worldview and solidified his determination to challenge the burgeoning power of Rome. The Second Punic War began with a bold and audacious move, Hannibal's crossing of the Alps. This unprecedented feat, bringing an army of war elephants across treacherous mountain passes, shocked Rome and demonstrated Carthaginian strategic brilliance, while the human cost for Hannibal's men was immense. Disease, starvation, and hostile tribes decimated his ranks. The symbolic impact was even greater. It brought the war directly to Roman soil. Hannibal's early victories at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae proved devastating to Roman forces. The Battle of Cannae in 216 BC is considered one of the greatest tactical defeats in Roman history. Hannibal encircled and annihilated a vastly larger Roman army through masterful maneuvering and exploiting their predictable tactics. These triumphs instilled fear throughout Rome and prompted desperate measures to counter Carthaginian dominance. Despite his victories, Hannibal faced significant limitations. He lacked sufficient reinforcements and supplies from Carthage, hindering his ability to capitalize on his successes. Rome's resilience proved remarkable. They refused to surrender, constantly rebuilding their armies and adapting their strategies. The Roman citizen army, despite its early defeats, demonstrated a stubborn determination that would ultimately prove crucial in the long run. Fabius Maximus, appointed as Roman general, adopted a strategy of attrition, avoiding direct confrontation with Hannibal, but harassing his supply lines and wearing down his forces. This Fabian strategy proved surprisingly effective in denying Hannibal the opportunity to decisively defeat Rome, prolonging the war and draining Carthaginian resources further. Scipio Africanus's rise to prominence marked a turning point in the Second Punic War. He successfully campaigned in Iberia, defeating Hasdrubal Barca, Hannibal's brother, and severing Carthaginian supply lines. Scipio then invaded North Africa itself, forcing Hannibal to return from Italy to defend Carthage. The ensuing Battle of Zama in 202 BC ultimately sealed Carthage's fate. The Treaty of Carthage concluded the Second Punic War. Carthage was stripped of its overseas territories, its navy drastically reduced, and forced to pay a crippling indemnity to Rome. The once proud Carthaginian empire became little more than a shadow of its former self, a client state under Roman control. This and abroad. This marked the beginning of the long decline that would ultimately lead to Carthage's final destruction less than 2 centuries later. The First Punic War culminated in the Battle of Agate's Islands in 241 BC, a decisive Roman naval victory. It crippled Carthage's ability to wage war at sea, depleted resources, and a weary populace forced Carthage to sue for peace. The terms were harsh: surrender Sicily and Sardinia, pay a substantial indemnity, and dismantle their fleet. This defeat marked the beginning of Carthage's decline, shattering its maritime dominance and revealing vulnerabilities in its military strategy that Rome would exploit in future conflicts. Despite the peace treaty, resentment simmered in Carthage. The heavy indemnity payments crippled the economy, and many felt humiliated by Rome's triumph. Hamilcar Barca, a brilliant general who had fought valiantly throughout the war, recognized the existential threat posed by Rome. He began formulating a strategy for Carthaginian resurgence, expansion westward into Iberia, a modern Spain and Portugal. This would provide new resources, manpower, and a buffer against Roman aggression, laying the foundation for future conflict. Hamilcar's campaign in Iberia was brutal and protracted. He employed innovative tactics to subdue the local tribes, including strategic marriages between Carthaginian officers and Iberian princesses, a calculated move to forge alliances and secure loyalty. His son-in-law, Hasdrubal, continued his work, establishing New Carthage as a vital base of operations. However, treachery within the ranks led to an explosion that killed Hamilcar in 228 BC, leaving the future of the Iberian campaign uncertain. Hasdrubal's successor was Hannibal Barca, Hamilcar's son, a young man driven by an intense desire for revenge against Rome. Inheriting his father's ambition and military genius, Hannibal consolidated Carthaginian power in Iberia, demonstrating remarkable skill as a commander. He brutally suppressed any remaining resistance from the Iberian tribes, securing their resources and manpower to fuel his grand plan, an invasion of Italy itself, a daring and unprecedented gamble. Hannibal's crossing of the Alps in 218 BC was an astonishing feat of military engineering and endurance. His army, comprised of Carthaginian soldiers, Iberian mercenaries, war elephants, and cavalry, faced treacherous terrain, hostile tribes, and freezing conditions. The losses were staggering, but Hannibal persevered, emerging from the mountains to strike at Rome's heartland with a force that shocked the Roman Republic. The early Roman defeats at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae were catastrophic. Hannibal's tactical brilliance repeatedly outmaneuvered larger Roman armies, inflicting devastating casualties. At Cannae in 216 BC, he encircled and annihilated a Roman force estimated to be over 70,000 men, one of the most decisive defeats in Roman history. While unable to take Rome itself, Hannibal's presence paralyzed Italy, triggering widespread rebellion among Rome's allies. Despite his victories, Hannibal faced several critical limitations. He struggled to secure vital reinforcements from Carthage, which was preoccupied with other conflicts in Africa and Sicily. Roman resilience proved remarkable. They refused to negotiate despite repeated defeats, gradually wearing down Hannibal's forces through attrition. The Romans adopted the Fabians' strategy, avoiding direct confrontation and harassing Hannibal's supply lines, a tactic that slowly began to turn the tide. While Hannibal campaigned in Italy, Scipio Africanus emerged as Rome's leading general, recognizing that defeating Hannibal required attacking Carthage directly, Scipio launched a daring invasion of Africa in 204 BC. He successfully secured alliances with Numidian tribes and systematically dismantled Carthaginian power bases across North Africa, forcing Hannibal to return from Italy. The Battle of Zama in 202 BC marked the final confrontation between Hannibal and Scipio. Despite employing innovative tactics, Hannibal was ultimately defeated by Scipio's superior cavalry and Roman discipline. The loss effectively ended Carthaginian hopes for victory in the Second Punic War. Carthage surrendered unconditionally, accepting terms even harsher than those imposed after the First Punic War. The Third Punic War, 149–146 BC, was a brutal and largely symbolic conflict. Fueled by Roman paranoia and Cato the Elder's relentless calls for Carthage's destruction, Rome laid siege to the city. After a 3-year siege, Carthage fell. The city was systematically destroyed, its population enslaved or killed, and its territory annexed as the Roman province of Africa. The once mighty Carthaginian civilization vanished from history, a stark warning about the perils of imperial ambition. The Third Punic War concluded in a brutal and decisive Roman victory. Carthage was utterly destroyed, its walls leveled, its population enslaved or killed. The once proud city became little more than a salt flat, a symbolic act of vengeance intended to erase Carthage from the Mediterranean world. While Rome claimed it had eliminated a perennial threat, the destruction inadvertently sparked a new wave of anxieties amongst Roman elites. Had they gone too far? Could such complete annihilation truly guarantee lasting peace? Or would it merely sow resentment? The aftermath of the Third Punic War saw a significant shift in Roman policy towards Africa. While Carthaginian territory was annexed, it wasn't integrated seamlessly into the Roman Republic. Instead, it became a vital source of grain and resources managed by Roman governors who often exploited the local population. The seeds of unrest were sown as former Carthaginians, now reduced to servitude or tenant farmers, harbored deep-seated resentment towards their new masters. This simmering discontent would eventually manifest in localized rebellions. The Numidian revolt, erupting in 104 BC, served as a stark warning. King Jugurtha, exploiting the lingering bitterness amongst Berber tribes and the corruption within Roman governance, launched a protracted guerrilla war against Rome's authority. This conflict exposed vulnerabilities in the Republic's military infrastructure and highlighted the challenges of controlling vast territories populated by diverse and often hostile populations. The Numidian War proved far more costly and prolonged than initially anticipated. The Jugurthane War had profound consequences for Rome's internal politics. Marius, a homo novus, a man from a humble background, rose to prominence through his military successes against Jugurtha. His reforms of the Roman army abroad, abolishing property requirements and creating a professional soldiery loyal to their general rather than the state, fundamentally altered the structure of Roman power. This shift inadvertently laid the groundwork for future civil wars, as generals would increasingly leverage their armies for political gain. The Sertorian War in Hispania, as modern Spain, further destabilized the Republic. Quintus Sertorius, a Roman general who had served during the Jugurthane War, led a fierce rebellion against Roman rule, attracting support from local tribes resentful of Roman expansion. The conflict lasted for years and drained Rome's resources, demonstrating the difficulty in pacifying conquered territories and the enduring appeal of resistance movements. Spartacus's slave revolt, 73 to 71 BC, stands as a chilling testament to the social tensions simmering within Roman society. Fueled by brutal conditions on the latifundia, large agricultural estates, and the desperation of enslaved people, Spartacus led an army of gladiators and runaways against Rome. Though ultimately defeated, the revolt exposed the Republic's reliance on slave labor and the inherent instability of a system built upon such exploitation. The Gracchus brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, attempted to address social inequalities through land redistribution programs in the 2nd century BC. Their efforts, though initially popular with the plebeians common citizens, were fiercely opposed by conservative senators who feared losing their power and wealth. The brothers' assassinations marked a turning point. Political violence became increasingly commonplace, shattering any pretense of civic discourse and escalating tensions within the Republic. The rise of powerful generals like Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar further eroded the authority of the Senate. These men commanded vast armies and amassed immense wealth through military conquests and provincial governorships. The formation of the first triumvirate, a political alliance between these three individuals, effectively bypassed the traditional institutions of Roman governance and paved the way for Caesar's eventual dictatorship. Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon River in 49 BC marked the definitive end of the Roman Republic as it had existed for centuries. This act of defiance against the Senate plunged Rome into a bloody civil war, pitting Caesar's loyalists against those who remained committed to preserving republican ideals. The conflict would ultimately result in Caesar's victory and his assumption of dictatorial power, a transformation that fundamentally altered the course of Roman history. The legacy of Carthage extends far beyond its physical destruction. Its innovative maritime trade practices, sophisticated governance structures, and resilient culture left an indelible mark on the Mediterranean world. The relentless Roman pursuit of Carthaginian dominance served as a catalyst for profound transformations within Rome itself, accelerating social unrest, military reforms, and ultimately contributing to the Republic's demise. Carthage's story is therefore not merely one of defeat, but also of influence. The Third Punic War concluded not with a grand battle, but with methodical destruction. Scipio Aemilianus's siege of Carthage was brutal, lasting 3 years. The Carthaginians, depleted and desperate, fought valiantly, but their resources were exhausted. When the city finally fell in 104-6 BC, Roman soldiers systematically demolished everything within the walls. Homes, temples, public buildings, all reduced to rubble. This wasn't merely conquest. It was a deliberate act of annihilation intended to erase Carthage from history and utterly break its spirit. The surviving Carthaginians were enslaved or scattered. The land itself was salted, though this practice is now debated by historians. It symbolized Rome's determination to prevent any future resurgence. A new Roman province, Africa, was established on the former Carthaginian territory. For a time, a small Roman colony was briefly established within the ruins, intended as a symbolic reminder of Roman dominance and to control the valuable agricultural lands. However, this attempt proved short-lived. Despite Rome's efforts at erasure, Carthage's influence lingered. Carthaginian culture, their trade networks, maritime skills, and religious practices had been deeply woven into the fabric of the Mediterranean world. Elements of Punic language and customs persisted among Berber populations in North Africa for centuries. Moreover, the memory of a powerful, independent Carthage served as a cautionary tale within Roman political discourse, influencing debates about expansion, empire, and the dangers of unchecked ambition. The legend of Carthage endured. Roman writers like Virgil and Livy, despite portraying Carthage as an enemy to be vanquished, acknowledged its power and sophistication. Through literature and art, the story of Carthage was reimagined and adapted, becoming intertwined with themes of hubris, decline, and the inevitable rise and fall of empires. Even in defeat, Carthage secured a place within Western mythology, representing both a formidable rival and a tragic symbol of lost greatness. Today, the archaeological site of Carthage stands as a poignant testament to a once great civilization. Excavations continue to reveal new insights into Carthaginian life, their religious beliefs, artistic achievements, and complex social structures. Though erased from the map by Rome, Carthage remains an enduring symbol of resilience, innovation, and the cyclical nature of power in the ancient world. A reminder that even empires eventually crumble, leaving behind legacies that resonate through time.